Hey everybody, this is Jack with the Chorus and the Chaos, and if you listen to us for any amount of time, you know we're always talking about raising our kids to love the Lord Jesus, not just survive a culture war. And that's exactly what our friends at Generations are helping families do. They've built an incredible library of Christ-centered homeschool curriculum, books, and podcasts to help your family apply the Bible to every area of life, be it history, science, worldview. All of it is pointing back to Jesus. And their math curriculum, well, I'll tell you this, their math curriculum is so good, it practically counts as discipleship counts. Get it? Okay. So if you want the tools to help your family grow in truth, not just survive on screen time and dad jokes, head to generations.org and use the code CHORUS at the checkout for 15% off your entire order. That's generations.org, code CHORUS for 15% off. Because discipleship starts at home. And unlike my dad jokes, their stuff really holds up. History does not always announce itself. Sometimes it begins in confusion. Such was the case in western New York around 1820. This was a region electrified by revival. Sermons crash like waves across small towns, preachers warn of judgment, and entire communities wrestle with the notion of eternity. And somewhere in the middle of all the noise stands a 14-year-old boy, Joseph Smith. He would later write of this time, saying, quote, "It was a time of great confusion and bad feeling." He commented about how ministers denounced one another, converts shifted loyalties, each claiming scripture, each claiming certain. And for Joseph, the question was not theoretical. He wondered which church was true, which church holds the keys to salvation, which church truly speaks for God.
And we need to realize that the Holy Spirit will lead us into all truth. Can you see how this stuff could work in your life?
One night, as he wrestled with this, he read James 1:5, which says, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God." The words strike him. Ask God. It sounds simple. It is anything but. Early morning, the air bites with cold, mist drifts low between the trees. The world feels suspended, waiting for the day. There was no choir, no congregation, no witnesses, just a boy stepping into the quiet wilderness. He went to a secluded place where he had chopped wood before, familiar ground. And there he kneels, and he begins to pray. But what he describes next is not serenity. It's more of a confrontation. A heaviness settles around him, a pressure, as though the air itself is resisting him. He tries to speak, but he can't. His tongue feels bound. Darkness thickens around him, not merely the absence of light, but a presence that feels deliberate. He later wrote that he felt seized by a power bent on his entire destruction. Now, whether interpreted as spiritual warfare, panic under isolation, or a memory shaped later by conviction, Joseph himself experiences it as immediate and terrifying. The grove, this wood, became hostile towards him. The silence presses in. He believes and thinks he may die here. And then, with what strength he has left, he forces out a plea, a cry. God, deliver me. And then, light. Not sunlight breaking through branches. He claims a pillar of light descends from above the brightness of the sun. The darkness around him shatters. The oppression lifts as suddenly as it came. And within the light, he says, stand two persons, distinct, embodied, hovering above him in the air. One speaks.
Joseph.
It's personal. Not boy, not servant, but his name.
Joseph.
The other is then introduced.
This is my beloved son. Hear him.
The language echoes Scripture, the baptism of Jesus, the Mount of Transfiguration, and now, according to Joseph, spoken in a wooden grove in upstate New York. Now, pause here, because if this is true, this moment changes everything. Not merely a reassurance, not forgiveness whispered into his heart, but the visible appearance of the Father and the Son, distinct, corporal, speaking audibly and addressing Joseph Smith directly. Joseph then asked the question that drove him into the trees. Which church is right? There's no hesitation in the answer.
None.
He's told clearly to join none of them. Their creeds are described as corrupt. Their teachers are drawing near with their lips while their hearts remain far from God. In one exchange, centuries of Christian confessions are declared wholly insufficient. The Reformation, the creeds, the church is struggling imperfectly to guard apostolic doctrine, all set aside. This is an absolute sweeping verdict. If this exchange happened as described, then apostolic Christianity had drifted so far that God himself intervened. If he did not, then a 14-year-old believed he had heard heaven correct the church. Either way, the weight of this moment, the weight of this supposed conversation is immense. Joseph is not merely comforted, he's commissioned. He's told more will be revealed, that his role in the unfolding story is not finished.
We think on those things that are true, on those things that are honest, that are just, that are lovely, that will transform your life. And we need to realize that the Holy Spirit will lead us into all truth.
Hello and welcome to the Chorus in the Chaos podcast. My name is Jack, and we are back. The boys are back in town after a little bit of an unplanned break, so we appreciate your patience. Our personal lives went haywire for about 2 months from the holidays into January and in February, but we're back, and I'm here with Grayson and Blake. We're here to talk about Mormonism and all things around that. So welcome, guys. How are you?
Doing good. Glad to be back.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It is good. All right. So Mormonism. So we just heard that thrilling tale.
You have
I'm trying to think of like something clever. Like it was like the sea breeze over
the voice of
Scottish Isles.
The voice of the demon in the narrative sounded like is it Zorb from Power Rangers? You know, that guy like in the
Kinda,
tube,
yeah.
you know?
Kinda
Yeah.
did.
Mighty Mormon Power Rangers.
Joseph.
Yeah. Coming to you from Angel Studios.
Yeah, that's right. I saw an Angel Studios movie this evening. I took my wife to go. This is completely unrelated. I guess it's Mormon related, but we went and saw that.
This is Mormon
romantic
adjacent.
comedy. Yeah, Mormon adjacent. That Kevin James solo Mio movie.
Mm-hmm.
We had a mutual friend who suggested it. It was okay. I give it 6 out of 10.
Well, our mutual friend, it's his favorite movie of all time, apparently. So and we dare not say anything against it.
That's right.
So if he's listening,
I must have missed this.
But no, so Joseph Smith. So the story kind of tells, that narrative told the whole bit, right? He sees quote unquote God, and God tells him, this is how the whole thing starts, right? God tells him, you got to start a new church, and clearly it was not God. Like, we'll get into a lot of this in our theology episode following this one, but the narrative's there to kind of be entertaining. But let's pull the curtain up and remove any secret. There's Joseph Smith was not visited by God.
And for any of the information that we're going to give, we need to preface it with this. Mormon history is one of the wildest cults that we will look at. There have been entire books dedicated to this subject. Before we started recording, we were talking even just about the amount of work that the Cultish podcast has put in with Mormonism and things like that. This is something that we recognize that we're not like, this is not our wheelhouse as far as these are the things that we're experts in. What we hope to do with this episode is to take some bullet points, really some service level bullet points of kind of the history of Mormonism that will then give us a little bit of context when we talk about the theological things in the next episode. There's a lot that goes into the fact that Mormonism is without a doubt the most polytheistic religion of all time. I mean, makes Hindus look like, conservative Bible Baptists or something. And so there's an intensity there. So there's probably going to be stories in the history section that you're going to want to hear that we're not covering. But there's quite a lot. One of the things foundationally to remember is that Joseph Smith and his father, from a very young age, were both known con men. That they had gotten wrapped up in a ton of legal troubles with the practice of treasure hunting, where landowners would pay them to come onto their land and use their seer stones so that they could look into the substrate of the earth and tell them if there was treasure there or not. And all of this is well before this encounter with Moroni and the Father and the Son and all of those things. And we might touch upon this next time, but there's also some very interesting parallels between the founding of Mormonism and Islam. Almost exact. As far as the experiences that the founders have and all of those things. And so we might touch on some of those things coming up as well.
Yeah. So the audio you heard was a telling of the first vision that he had, but it's important to note that Joseph Smith claims to have a number of visions. There's, in reading about this, there's some interesting. It's just nonsensical sounding, and you have to tell me, Blake. I don't know more about maybe the Islam side, but he supposedly gets these repeated visits from an angel named Moroni, and Moroni tells him, "Hey, there are these tablets up in the woods in this hill. Go find them." He finds them, can't look at them, put them back. You're not ready. And once a year for like 4 or 5 years, he sends them back. This angel visits him and says, "Go back to this spot, find the tablets. You found them. Oh, you're not ready." And it's just weird. Like it's just bizarre. It's a bizarre occurrence. Now, the Mormons would say that he was learning patience and discipline and things of this sort, but it's just goofy. To me, it was just goofy. He's finally able to retrieve the plates, and he gets permission, I guess, in 1987, the famed golden plates.
Yeah. Another interesting just little comment to Joseph Smith's character. Because again, when we're getting into this stuff of like the translating stones and all of this, one of the things that is very, very popular at this time, just societally in the United States, are things like treasure hunting. I mean, Indian like burial mounds are being ransacked. There's lots of pieces of Egyptian fare that are being transported into the United States and kind of put like in sideshow tours and things like that. Pieces of mummies and things like this. And this is also the time that there's a lot of, mysticism surrounding some of those things, Indian, burial grounds, mummies, all of those treasure hunting and seer stones and witchcraft practices. So all of that kind of feeds the context of where Joseph is at. So this whole thing about translating later that we'll look at, translating through seer stones, he doesn't just come up with that. That's something he's already practicing, and other people are practicing, using these techniques allegedly to be able to see things and interpret things that they can't actually.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You talk about the environment, Blake. That whole area of New York, and if you listen to our spiritualism episode, this is not that far distance-wise from where everything is happening and the growth of the Fox sisters and all that. It's not a great distance. Like whatever is going on in New York, whatever they put in the water in the early 1800s,
right,
Western New York, like I don't know, very strange. But you're right. It was kind of, there was a cultural environmental movement where all this mysticism, spiritualism, people were just going crazy and doing stuff, doing weird things. Like it was all over the place.
I always wonder about stuff like that, just because, of course, you hear of how outlandish it seems, right? I mean, here's a guy who with his dad used seer stones and dowsing rods and was a known fraud in the area. All of a sudden, a few years later, not too far from where he was, is able to then make a brand new reputation by just claiming to have visions. So, I mean, but if this is a landscape of American Christianity at that time, or just American religion, I would say, or spirituality, it's really not all that crazy to think of mass amounts of people being duped into something that's fresh and new and exciting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Another interesting little bit. Years later, after, I believe it was after Joseph's death, spoiler alert, his mother wrote kind of like a memoir of his childhood, because, people are always looking for that fanfic, And one of the things that she mentioned that's kind of a black eye for Mormonism, that she didn't understand the consequences of this statement. But she writes extensively about how when he was a boy, what a fantastic storyteller he was. And that he would come home and, no television, no radio, no entertainment that way. And she said that he would sit and he would spin together a tale that he had come up with for an hour, with characters and lands and all kinds of different. I mean, the original Brandon Sanderson, all kinds of crazy stuff. And she really was like, oh, he was just such a brilliant boy, and he was able to tell these stories and have names and characters and people that he would remember and all that, which really kind of plays into.
Yeah.
Well, we got some evidence of that storytelling intelligence in some of the things that we're going to see.
Yeah. So to push the story along, so he's finally given permission to grab these ancient golden tablets, and supposedly he's told these tablets were distributed there from a people that lived in the Americas a long, long time ago, and they contained this secret knowledge, or whatnot. So he takes these amazing golden tablets, and he's been given a gift to be able to translate them. But he doesn't do it alone. He reaches out to a family friend, a gentleman named Martin Harris, and he asks Harris.
People are not allowed to see them.
No, yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to see them. And so what he does, they sit in a room and they put, I've seen different things, a curtain, a sheet, whatever, but he puts some barrier between them on the table. So Harris is on one side, Joseph Smith's on the other. And so Harris is, again, he can't see these tablets. And then Joseph begins to translate. He's using the seer stone what I read, and maybe you read differing things. And Blake, you're right. You mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different accounts of this stuff, so it's really hard to pin down. You listener, you may have heard something and heard it slightly different. Who knows, right? A lot of this stuff is kind of made up, I would say, as it went along, and stories change and go depending on who you talk to.
They changed even from
depending
Joseph
on when
Smith.
It was told. That's right.
Yep.
So, but what I read is he would stick his face in a hat, and when his head was in the hat with the seer stone, he was told he would see in English what the ancient inscriptions said.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and
Duolingo, like
right.
Or,
and he the universal translator in Star Trek.
Yeah, that's right. That's a better.
Yeah. So one of the things that too is you'll see that keeps popping up is this concept of like ancient Egyptian, like Egyptian writing and things like that. Because again, it's very in vogue at the time. It's not something that he comes up with. And so, having his face in the hat, looking through the seer stones, he's able to translate these things, and he's able then to dictate that to various people. Martin Harris is one. There's a couple others that are able to, transcribe and things like that. But again, as they ask, can we see, like, this is incredible, this is amazing, can we see these plates? They are not allowed to look at the plates or to see them.
Imagine the temptation. I mean, you're Harris and you're sitting in the room, so you've got the sheet between you, so you can't see the tablets, right?
And the man's got his face in a hat.
I know.
I
mean, like you
can
get over there real quick.
Totally normal.
Right. Yeah.
When I was reading about this, do you remember that there's that famous Simpsons scene when Principal Skinner is cooking steamed hams for Seymour, the superintendent. I can't think of his name. Superintendent Chalmers.
Super Nintendo Chalmers.
Do either of you know the story? Because if I don't, it's just going to be me on an island out here. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not going to be funny to you, but it's very famous. But you've probably seen the meme. So he's trying to cook dinner. Dinner is like on fire in the oven, but his boss is coming in. So Superintendent Chalmers comes over, and Principal Skinner's panicking, and he puts him in the kitchen, and he runs out the window and goes to Krusty Burger and gets like a plate of Krusty Burgers and comes back, and he puts them on the table, and Superintendent Chalmers is like, I thought we were having ham. And he goes, oh, well, these are steamed hams. That's what we call them. Steamed hams.
Oh, right.
Like hamburgers, steamed hams.
Gosh.
And then the kitchen door like kind of swings open at one point. He goes, oh my goodness, what is happening in there? And he goes, Aurora Borealis.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think I have seen
He goes,
that.
Can I see it? Can I see it? No, of course not. No, you can't see it. Anyway, my brain is weird sometimes, but that's what it reminded me of, like Aurora Borealis happening in the kitchen. And the guy's like, can I see it? This is incredible.
Yeah.
No, you can't see it. Martin Harris stood alone in his house, perplexed, opening drawers that he knew and had seen were already empty. But he checked the desk again. He checked the cupboard again, and the chest by the wall. He told himself to slow down, to think. These things weren't lost. They were just misplaced. Paper didn't just vanish into thin air. But when he reached for the bundle of papers, one more time, the last place that he saw them, and felt nothing but bare wood, his stomach dropped. The pages, the manuscript was gone. All 116 pages, handwritten, carefully stacked. The opening portion of the translation he had spent weeks writing down, word by word, gone. Crestfallen, Harris sat down in a chair. No, he said out loud. No, it can't be. He jumped up. He searched again, more frantically now. He questioned his family. He retraced his steps. He replayed every single moment that the pages had been out of his sight. but nothing helped. So when he finally wrote out to tell Joseph Smith that the 116 pages were gone, he knew it would not be well received. See, at this point in time, Joseph Smith was in his early 20s, mostly unknown, a man claiming that God revealed to him the location of a set of ancient golden plates buried in the earth near his home in New York. And according to Joseph, these plates contained the record of an ancient people and were written in a language that he couldn't read naturally, but God had gifted him and granted him the ability to translate these texts by supernatural means. So months earlier, Joseph had done that. He'd begun dictating the translation, but he didn't write it out himself. He spoke, and Martin Harris wrote. Day after day, Harris sat across from him, and Joseph spoke, and Harris wrote. When Harris paused, Joseph waited. When Harris asked for a word again, Joseph repeated. And after time, these pages grew into quite a sizable stack, 116 pages. One evening, Harris looked at them and said quietly, "This is more than I thought." Joseph nodded. "It's only the beginning," he said. But the amount of time that Martin Harris was spending with Joseph Smith began to raise questions at home.
"Martin," his wife said, "you're risking everything. What are you doing?"
"I'm telling you, it's real," he explained. I hear it as he speaks."
"Then you need to show me," she said. "Show me what you're writing. Help me understand why this is so important and taking so much time."
Harris knew that Joseph Smith had forbidden it. But pressure mounted. Friends questioned, neighbors whispered. So Harris returned to Joseph. "They think I've been deceived," Harris said. "If they could just see the manuscript, they would see what you're doing." Joseph shook his head. "I've asked God," he said, and the answer was no. But Harris persisted. "If this is from God, it will hold up." Joseph prayed again and again. And finally he returned with a different answer. "You may take it," Joseph said, "but God said there are conditions." Harris listened closely. "You may only show it to those agreed upon. You must keep it secure. If it's lost," he said, "the consequences will be serious." I understand," Harris said. "I will guard it." But now, coming back to Joseph with the pages lost in his presence, Harris struggled to speak. "They're gone." Joseph stared at him. "What do you mean gone?" "The pages, they're gone. I don't know how. I can't find them." Joseph Smith's face collapsed. According to his own account, he says he wept openly. "All is lost," he cried. "What shall I do?" Harris, desperate, asked the question, "Well, just translate it again." Joseph answered immediately, "No, I can't." "Why not?" Joseph explained what he had said God had revealed to him, that the pages were lost and they had fallen into the hands of wicked men, and that these men intend to alter these words. Harris tried to follow. Joseph continued, "If you translate it again, they will compare the two manuscripts, and if there are differences, they will say that I've changed my story." "But if it's the same," Harris said, "wouldn't that prove everything you said is true?" Joseph shook his head. "The Lord has commanded otherwise." Eventually, Joseph said God restored his ability to translate, but with strict instruction. He was never to retranslate the lost portion. Instead, Joseph said God prepared another revelation, the second revelation, which covered much of the same historical period as the lost manuscript, but with different wording and different emphasis. So Joseph resumed dictation from this new starting point. The original 116 pages were never reproduced, They were never recovered, and no altered version has ever surfaced. And when the Book of Mormon was published in 1830, the opening portion originally dictated to Martin Harris was missing. Those pages, once written, once held, once read, never returned. And the story of how Mormonism was founded moved forward without them. Well, I don't know about you, but if I were Martin Harris, even though he lost him or his wife took him or whatever, can you imagine handwriting 116 pages?
No.
That's actually a lot.
Yes, I've done that. I
It
was
is
a bad kid. I had to do that as like a punishment. And it was...
To yourself?
No. Well, I mean, it was given to me.
Or who punished you? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
A parent, a school teacher, somebody.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I'd done something probably deserving of it. No question about it. But I think I had like 200 pages that I had to copy of the same sentence over and over again.
Yeah. My parents, I had a similar punishment. I could not be ungrounded until I had finished writing all of those sentences. It was brutal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hand cramps.
And then I wrote them, and then I told my parents the Lord instructed that I wasn't to show them to anybody. And, no, I'm just kidding. What?
Yeah, how convenient, right? So Blake, you were saying, we were talking earlier that the 116 pages, even from our understanding, is from the Mormon perspective. It's kind of a black eye, like it's a thing that the Mormons themselves,
right,
maybe struggle with, or
speaks,
they like.
Well, I think they've pretty well explained it away in their own minds. I think it speaks more so to the craftiness of, again, just what a con man Joseph Smith is, and how he has this near brush with a fatal mistake by letting Harris take these 116 pages, because, again, like the narrative said, if he would have tried to reproduce it, then those old pages would have been, these don't match, like they're not even close. One of the things that he kind of implements later when he writes something and then doesn't write the exact same thing, if he's like retranslating, is that he says that in that Egyptian writing, that, one emblem, one picture, one scratch can hold paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of information. And so, that's how he's able to get the entire Book of Mormon out of just a few, gold plates. Yeah. And so a lot of it is, again, it's just nonsense. And he's so crafty that he just comes up with no, this is the punishment. You lost the things, and now there's 116 missing pages, and that's just the way it's going to be. And he implements that kind of thing. Other times, later when they get into trouble and they're looking to move, because the group of Mormons is hopping around all over the place because they're getting run out of everywhere that they settle. Yeah. At one point, Joseph Smith takes one of his right-hand men, who a lot of these right-hand men end up leaving the movement. I mean, his own family members, some of them end up leaving the movement over the years. But he basically gives one of his right-hand men instructions: go up to Canada. You're going to meet a man there who's going to sell us this huge portion of land, because he's going to buy the rights for the Book of Mormon. So he's going to buy those rights. We'll be able to get the land, and then we'll be able to settle and be, free from kind of governmental persecution and things like that. So this was a big bright spot, it's a big moment of hope. The guy goes up to Canada, and nobody wants it. Nobody wants his book. The other interesting bit is this whole origins of the Native Americans and the whole origin story. Again, this is a popular kind of thing at the time. There are other contemporary books, which of course are written as fiction, of all kinds of fantastical origins of the Native Americans. And so he really plays into the popular interest at the time. And it's kind of like charlatans today, how they play into the popular interest of the day. And he does that same thing. Well, anyway, this guy goes up. Nobody wants to buy the rights to the Book of Mormon. And so he comes back, and Joseph had said, this is going to happen. This is going to be an answered thing. I mean, he was so confident in his writing ability, apparently, that somebody was going to pick it up. Well, the guy comes back and says, nobody wants it. And Joseph Smith's way to basically weasel out of it is to say, well, sometimes God gives a false direction and a false vision to test our faith. Well, let's just move on to the next. I mean, it's that, it's that chaotic of a thing. So anyway, 116 pages. Jack, you can pick it up from there.
Yeah. So as you heard, they lost them, and things move on. They bring in other translators. Blake hinted at this earlier. There was a guy named Oliver Cowdery.
Yeah. Another scribe. Yeah. Another trusted
quote unquote scribe.
Yeah.
And by the way, these people that were these professional scribes were people that just like lived around him.
Right.
Like conveniently,
family members, financial supporters. Yeah.
Yes. People invested.
Close ties. Close ties.
He eventually there's witnesses of the plates. Supposedly they have witnesses of the plates. There's people who come forward, and a handful who sign some statement saying that they've seen the plates. But conveniently, again, they come from two households. I think it's 5 people. There's 8 people who've seen it. Maybe 5 people that signed the thing. I don't remember the exact numbers, but they all come from two households. His own house.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that.
Oh, is okay. So his own house, and then his buddy's house down the road. But what were we gonna say, Blake?
So the way I understand it, I'm kind of pulling this from my memory because this just jogged it. These guys, they're like, we have got to see the plates. Like things are heating up. There's starting to already be some fractions kind of in the movement. There's already some outside pressure and inside pressure. We've got to see the plates. So Joseph takes them out into the woods and essentially says, if you have enough faith, God will reveal the plates to you. Okay. So there's a group of guys, they're out there in their woods, and they're all praying. And Joseph says, if any of you have doubts at all, any level of doubt, you need to go home right now, because you're interfering with the other people's ability to see the plates. So if you guys get up and they leave, and we're talking hours and hours and hours. So you're on your knees in the woods 4 hours, expecting these plates to be revealed to you. And so, of course, I think naturally you would start thinking like, well, maybe I'm the problem, and so guys kind of start getting up and they leave and things like that. Well, the people ultimately that claim to see the plates do not claim to physically see them, but that they are revealed to them in their minds. So they're praying, and God gives them a vision of the plates, and that is the confirmation that the plates actually exist.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Well, that about sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
According to what I read is the plates have never been seen, and that's all true. Yeah. But they were never seen again later because he had to give them back to the angel Moroni.
Right.
He's got to put them back in his gold tablet library, I guess.
When you let somebody check out a book, you got to make sure to get it back.
You got to get it back. Yeah.
Especially the gold plated 3-ring binder. Yeah.
The gold plated trapper keeper.
Yep.
So 1830, the Book of Mormon is published, as Blake referenced, and the movement does begin to grow. Once the book is published, Joseph works pretty quickly to do organized church stuff. He creates officers, teachers, schedules, things of this sort, very practical stuff. There was very you see this today, the Mormons are very missionary oriented. You've seen the guys walking around in the tie and the white shirts, right? But this was in their culture very early on, because early converts were required to go preach. It was a way of demonstrating your faith, proving yourself and that you were faithful. So you would convert, and then you would go somewhere and go preach, right? And so very early on, it was quote unquote evangelistic in that mindset, right? And it reminded me, when I was reading about it, it reminded me of a long time ago. I interviewed for a position at an insurance sales, like an insurance sales job, long time ago. And no offense to insurance salespeople out there, if someone's listening to this, I'm not targeting you.
Yeah.
There's different roles for different people. This just wasn't for me, but I remember, and they and I kind of knew this because they screen you this way. But you sit down, and the guy's like, "You're not cut out for this if you're not ready to pick up the phone and call every one of your friends, family, and everyone you know and try and sell them insurance. Like, if you're not comfortable doing that, you're not cut out for this job." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't really want to call my in-laws." You know, it just, I don't know, that I didn't like that. So that wasn't cut out for me. There are people that it's fine, it's for them. But anyway, it reminded me of that. Like, they were encouraged to go, okay, you've converted, now go preach and go to all your friend circles, all your family, and begin to convert them. Right? It felt very, very, very similar to that structure, right? But that's how the church grows. It was evangelistic from the outset, and very, very set on growing in numbers and structure from early on.
Yeah. If you have any practical way of, or I guess practical questions about how they do it, look at all the MLMs. I mean, there's a reason why Mormons are typically the ones that have not only the largest amount of MLM proprietorships and stuff like that, but they do them alarmingly well. But it's built into their entire church structure and everything else too.
Yeah. Grayson, are you saying that Mormonism was the first pyramid scheme?
I am. It'll be like the moment where you get up on the whiteboard where Jim in the office around, he's like, yeah, there's a pyramid.
Yeah. I think one thing, and we definitely can't jump into this too deeply, but, and this will give a little taste for our next thing. You know, you ask, like, what makes the growth of this explode the way it does? And how is this so appealing? Because they are, I mean, we do have to give it to the Mormons, the early Mormons, they are persecuted. Like, people do not want them around. So what makes them dedicate to this so much? And I would say, my proposition to answer that question is that Mormonism, in more so than almost any other American cult, plays to the natural desires of man more than any other. Because ultimately in Mormonism, and as Joseph Smith develops the Book of Mormon, Doctrines and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price, all of which are supposed to be held in equality with the Bible, but they're not. They're held above the Bible, which is why you always see, if you see videos of Christians debating Mormons are always tearing down the Bible. They're always tearing down the Bible. Like, and what Christian would tear down the Bible to try to win people over for Christianity? It doesn't make sense. But but it plays to all the fleshly needs, because ultimately in Mormonism, you can become your own God. Like, you can die and become a god of your own system with all of your own wives, and you can be as our God, as we would understand the Christian God, once was a man, which is what Joseph Smith said. So you can become a god. And so there is very much a carnal appeal to that sinful reaction, or that sinful desire of man to ascend unto the throne of God. And and so this feeds the movement. And they begin to grow, and they're missional, and they go as carnal men to carnal men who like carnal things and want to reproduce carnality.
Yep. That's the thing. I mean, they were, and still are, I would say, in many ways, very effective in everything that they are doing organization-wise with evangelism, right? So they are being evangelists, no matter how you want to put it. This is their good news, but they're carrying out the work of their father, Satan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's the sad part, is you have so many people that are just being wrapped up and deceived. But again, as you said, Blake, under the auspices of why we had the curse to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. But
so the church continues to grow. Joseph Smith continues to have quote unquote revelations as the movement is growing. Usually these revelations were about who should be in leadership, maybe developing the doctrine, discipline, very practical stuff. But the one thing that appealed to followers at this time is that it made his followers feel like this was a religion with clear direction. It's current, it's timely, it's hip. It's
definitely.
It's like not outdated. Active, it's like up to the moment.
Active, exactly. Current revelation. We just got a word from God. Joey's the new secretary. Sorry, Bill, you don't get the. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So that appealed to people, and these missionaries are very missional minded. They begin to go all about. They tend to find success in a couple of big areas of Missouri and areas of Ohio. And as Blake mentioned, they would settle places and people did not like them. They would get run off and they were persecuted. Right. That happened in New York quite a bit in the early areas. In fact, Joseph Smith receives one of these convenient revelations that he's told by God, it's time to relocate, right? So again, they go to Missouri and Ohio and these different areas. There's quite a bit of settling in an area called Jackson County of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And in Missouri, it got really bad, right? So they come in, they migrate there, the movement's growing, and they just start doing a bunch of shady stuff. And the locals there, the people that were from there, did not like it. So they start buying up all the land. They start getting involved in elections.
They buy the media outlets, the local media, the papers, and all those things. Yeah.
They begin manipulating everything, and it caused a ton of conflict around land and economics and just the whole society as a whole.
Jack, did you read about, or Grayson, maybe you remember, I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think it was at this time that they had bought a piece of land that was supposed to be in perpetuity. Like it was like God said to Joseph Smith, like this was going to be the home base temple of the Mormon church. And it was like a big thing. And they bought this piece of land or whatever, that is still owned today, but it's owned by a offshoot of the main LDS church.
Yes.
Because the LDS church has fractured several times over.
Yeah.
Was that the Zionist one that holds movement? That one that holds that piece of land that was prophesied that this was going to, be held in perpetuity, and this was going to be where the true temple was and all that stuff, isn't even owned by the main Mormon church anymore. And it's kind of dangled in front of them by this other, I guess what they would view a heretical offshoot is like, we've got the land. This is what we, and so it's another, prophecy or whatever that has fallen short and failed. And maybe some of the listeners can comment the details. Cause that's just, I'm trying to remember the full details of it, but it's another one of those crazy.
Well, they did that because they were arguing that because it was such a holy area because it was like the Genesis account, right?
Yeah, there was something. There was something, and there was something that they were trying to link it to something else, and that it was so important. And then, of course, it gets split amongst the Mormons themselves. And anyway, somebody else can maybe fill us in some details on that. But yeah.
Yeah,
so there's all kinds of stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, a ton. Yep. Ton of fracturing. Tension grows internally between different factions of Mormonism and then just the locals in this Missouri area, and eventually just fights break out. There's all kinds of fighting. Mobs start destroying some church property, and I mean it is not a pretty sight. In 1838, then the state gets involved, and this is kind of crazy. There's what I read of, they called it an extermination order, and Missouri's governor issues this infamous order that Mormons must be exterminated or driven out of the land. It was a language they used at the time. Can you imagine that today?
Being there for those discussions.
It's just crazy.
That is not very nuanced, nor is it whimsical.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's all kinds of infighting too. You can read, there's a lot about the Missouri conflict that we won't get into, but there's a lot that happens there. But eventually the water gets so hot, so to speak, that they leave, and the Mormons flee to Nauvoo, Illinois. Mm-hmm. And I'd never actually heard of Nauvoo, Illinois until we started reading this. Right. But it is there. They go there. And the movement, at least for a bit, I would say stabilizes. Things kind of calm down. It does fracture again and whatnot.
Real quick though, in Missouri, the Mormons also militarize.
Oh, that's true.
They make and they're actually, there's another story where they position themselves for like a literal huge battle. They go marching somewhere for a couple days, but they're like getting sick and the weather's bad, and so they're finally like, and they don't like go through it.
Yeah,
like, this isn't as comfortable as thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So they fly to Nauvoo, and a lot happens in Nauvoo, and we'll hear the ending of that story here in a moment. But I think you wanted to mention something about an interesting tidbit, Blake, about some plates.
Yeah. So it's kind of in this time. So one of the things we didn't talk about, we skipped over it, and again because there's so much, is before all of this, what is produced is this thing called the Scroll of Abraham, is what it becomes known as. And basically it's part of a traveling sideshow, again, part of the Egyptian tombs and things, and mummies being put on display, and part of traveling circus kind of things, sideshows. There's this document that has these like hieroglyphs on it, and it's kind of, it's a relatively whole piece, but it's missing some things. Well, Joseph sees this, and he says that it is ancient Hebrew, or like an Egyptianized Hebrew kind of thing, and that it tells the story of I believe Abraham and some like missing biblical information and things like that. Of course, it touches upon the curse of Cain. One of the things I was telling the guys before we started, it's almost like Joseph has these talking points that when he's doing his visions and interpretations, he has to touch on certain things. And one of the things he just cannot stay away from, whether it's in the Book of Mormon, or whether it's in the Scroll of Abraham, or whether it's in the Kinderhook tablets, which we'll talk about in a second, is this concept of the curse of Ham, or the curse of Cain, and then translating down through the curse of Ham as those with black skin or dark skin, that they're cursed of God, which is part of their creation lore anyway. Yep. So we'll talk about that next week. But these Abraham scrolls, he translates them, and oh man, this is just incredible. This new revelation of all these things. Well, it come to find out that this document is pretty much a copy pasta death document that has been since that time found with many mummies. And it's essentially just an Egyptian kind of like death certificate. But Joseph, of course, made this whole big story out of it and what it was and all of that. So there was already question about his ability to translate and to see things, and his ability and the legitimacy of the things that he was saying. So not only with the Book of Mormon, but with the Scroll of Abraham as well. Well, while he's in Nauvoo, so this is 1843, there is this man who begins having visions. He's not a Mormon, okay? He begins having visions. He has 3 visions, 3 nights in a row, that he's supposed to go to this particular mound, and he's going to dig into that mound, and he's going to find some ancient plates. He takes a digging crew with him, and they, after this third dream that he has, they go to this burial mound. They begin digging into it, and lo and behold, they find 6 bell-shaped brass plates. And there's actually not pictures. What do they call that? Like reliefs, I guess, of these plates. You can look them up. You can look them up online. And they're double-sided, and there's just all of this kind of hieroglyphic-looking scratch on the front and the back. Well, of this crew of men that are digging these plates up, one of them is a Mormon. And he is very excited because he's hearing dreams told this main guy to go and dig in this spot. And so who can read these plates? Is there happen to be anybody in the area who knows how to translate these ancient writings? And so they excitedly, this Mormon goes and he excitedly reports it to Joseph Smith and other leaders of the church. Now, Smith takes these plates and he begins translating them. And he says that these contain the record of the descendants of Ham. And so this is it's like a secondhand kind of account of things. So he's actively working on this translation. There are, again, right-hand men of Joseph Smith who are writing in their personal journals that he's making great, headway in the translation. They publish pictures of these, what become known as the Kinderhook plates. They publish pictures of them in the Mormon newspapers. Okay, so this is a big deal. There's one problem. The Kinderhook plates are not real. The man who was having the visions, along with some other men, cut these brass plates out and did acid etching on them and then buried them for the stated purpose of trapping Joseph Smith. And so
just to expose him, basically.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying. Yeah.
So this is a deliberate forgery to expose that, no, he actually cannot translate the way that he says he can. He does not have visions from God and all of that. And it wasn't until I think the 1980s that the story of the Kinderhook plates had kind of fallen into the dark corners of history. But as history becomes more readily available, and then later on, especially with the internet and things like that, the Mormon Church is forced to make a statement on the Kinderhook plates, what exactly happened there. And they spin it very cleverly and say, oh, well, they never thought that it was anything. And it was revealed that they were fake and we just moved on from it and everything else. But the contemporary writers and newspapers and journals of Mormons at the time were saying, no, Joseph was actively, translating these plates. So again, it was just a gigantic hoax. And there was an interesting kind of bit, I think, with this. This was something that he had to operate in. This was probably the single biggest thing that was out of his control. Everything else was very much in his control. The golden plates were in his control, the 116 pages and what he was supposed to do with that, the land buying, right. Even the buying of parts of Missouri, all of this. But these Kinderhook plates have been dug up by a third party and well publicized and talked about. So he has to do something with it. He can't say, if somebody's saying that they've had visions and God took them to these, he can't say, oh no, this is fake, So he has to do something with it. And so they really get him, they really get him trapped, well. And again, it's not until much, much later in the 1900s that the Mormons officially say, well, no, we never believed that the Kinderhook plates were anything. So again, it is one of, in my mind, not just the plates, but all of the kind of adjacent things around it, is one of the big black eyes in LDS history, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's dig in and I've got a little more history for us on what happened in Nauvoo. History rarely ends quietly. Often it splinters before it fractures. And in June of 1844, in a small Illinois town along the Mississippi River, history broke wide open. By the early 1840s, Joseph Smith was no longer a simple farm boy in western New York kneeling in the grove of trees. He was the mayor of Nauvoo, Illinois, commander of a militia known as the Nauvoo Legion, presidential candidate, and a prophet to thousands. The city he founded rose quickly from swampland into one of the largest in Illinois. A temple was being built that climbed toward the sky. Converts poured in from Egypt. Nauvoo felt to believers like Zion reborn. But to outsiders, it felt like something else. Political bloc voting, independent courts, a powerful militia, and rumors. Rumors of secret teaching, rumors of new scripture, and rumors of plural marriage. Former insiders began to speak out. Dissenters printed accusations. In June of 1844, a newspaper called the Nauvoo Expositor published claims that Joseph was abusing power and secretly practicing polygamy. Joseph Smith, acting as mayor, declared this press a public nuisance, and the printing press was ordered to be destroyed. To his followers, this was an obvious defense against slander, but to his critics, which were growing, this was a demonstration of tyranny. And the tension in Illinois continued to rise. Not long later, warrants were issued for Joseph Smith's arrest. He fled across the Mississippi River into Iowa briefly. Some urged him to escape west, but others warned it would look like an admission of guilt. So he returned, reportedly saying,
I am going like a lamb to the slaughter, but I am as calm as a summer's storm.
He and his brother Hiram Smith were eventually arrested and taken to a jail in Carthage, Missouri. Outside the jail, militias gathered. Tension thickened like humidity before a dark storm. And inside, Joseph dictated letters, he prayed, and he waited. Then, on the afternoon of June 27, 1844, a mob of armed men, faces blackened with powder, rushed the jail. Shots rang out. Hiram was the first struck, and he fell to the floor. Joseph, who smuggled a small pistol into the prison, fired in defense. A desperate, chaotic moment, and then he moved to jump out of a window. More gunfire. He was hit multiple times, and he fell from a second-story window to the ground below, to his death. Within minutes, the man who had claimed angelic visitations, the man who had translated golden plates and built a city on the Mississippi, lay dead at only 38 years old. To his believers, this was martyrdom. To his critics, it was the violent end of a dangerous religious experiment. Joseph Smith remains one of the most polarizing religious figures in American history. Supporters see him as a prophet restored to divine commissions, a man who endured persecution, violence, and betrayal for what he believed was revelation from God. But critics see him as little more than a heretical, charismatic religious innovator who accumulated power, altered historic Christian doctrine, and introduced controversial practices such as polygamy. He inspired fierce devotion and generated fiercer opposition. And when he died, he left something unstable behind, a movement without a founder. When news of his death reached back to Nauvoo, grief quickly turned to confusion for his followers. The resounding question was, who leads now? See, Joseph had never named a public successor. Several men stepped forward, but in the end, one figure stood differently positioned: Brigham Young. He was the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, a body Joseph had expanded and empowered, in the final years of his life. Brigham was not as charismatic as Joseph. He was practical, blunt, administratively sharp. And in 1844, he addressed the followers in Nauvoo. Many recalled later that as he spoke, his voice and appearance seemed to change and echo Joseph Smith's, a moment many believers described as divine confirmation of his new leadership. Historically, what we know is this: the majority sided with him. Brigham Young inherited something somewhat fragile. Hostility in Illinois intensified after Joseph's death. Violence continued to be threatened. The temple remained unfinished. And so he made a decision Joseph had once hinted at: to leave. In 1846, under Brigham's direction, thousands crossed the Mississippi River. Wagons creaked westward towards Iowa, Nebraska, and the plains. And then in this is the place, he declared. Under his leadership, the movement transformed from a persecuted Midwestern sect into a Western religious society, structured, centralized, expansion-minded. If Joseph Smith was the visionary founder, Brigham Young became the institutional builder. Joseph Smith's death did not end the movement. In many ways, it hardened it. Martyr narratives strengthened belief, persecution stories unified followers. The memory of Carthage became sacred history, yet controversy has never left. Plural marriage, theocratic governance, claims of exclusive divine authority, ongoing debates about the early accounts of visions and tablets and translation. And for some, Joseph Smith stands among the great religious founders. But for Christians, he's a charismatic heretic. He fell from a jail window, but the movement of Mormonism did not fall with him. It moved westward, and unfortunately, it endured.